Right, welcome everybody to this planning board meeting, Wednesday, December 18th, 2019. First item on our agenda is roll call. Tonight we got Joe Sprecher, we got Krista Schwintzer, myself, Phil Ruck, we've got Jeremy Chubbuck, we got Dave Thompson, we got Mr. Beckett, and Mike Costello down on the end. Next up is acceptance of the agenda. Can I get a motion?
I move we accept the agenda.
Second.
Comments, additions
Just a couple of typos.
No, that's the agenda.
I apologize.
on the agenda?
On the agenda.
No, we're good. So any comments, edits? Hearing none, all those in favor of the agenda as is? Next up, you ready?
Thank you.
The approval of the minutes from October 16th, 2019. Joe, did you have some comments?
Sorry. Yeah, just a couple of typos on page 2. Just to clarify, it was a couple that were here. It's 115 Main Street. It says, third paragraph from the bottom just says 15 Main Street. Just want to clarify. And then the third page, Mr. Drexler stated that 92 Main Street. Fifth paragraph from the bottom. And then same typo on the 115 on the fourth page. Fifth paragraph from the top, owner of 115 Main Street. That's all. Just to clarify those parties.
Did you follow those?
Yeah.
Got them all?
Oh, and Mr. Thompson. Misspelled.
David Thompson appears on places as Mr. Thomas.
Okay.
That I think we want to fix. So on page 4, fourth paragraph from the bottom.
Yep.
On page 5, fifth paragraph from the top. And on page 7, it's the second full item from the top.
Very good. Other comments, edits? Very good. Making a motion. We had a second. We have edits. So any further discussion? All those in favor of the edited minutes? Very good. Next up, we have new business this evening. We have one public hearing. We have a major site plan review application by Regional School Unit number 26 for proposed expansions to the Orono Middle School and High School and ASA Adams Elementary School located at 6 Goodridge Drive, tax map 27-0, lot 12, in the medium density residential district. Could I have the applicant or representative please step up and tell us who you are and what you're proposing?
Good evening. I'm Meredith Higgins. I'm the superintendent for RSU 26, and I'm here tonight joined by some members of our technical professional team who've been working with us on our planning for the renovation project in our schools. And tonight we bring forward the culmination of a large part of the planning work that's been done to prepare for this for your review and request that you consider approval. With us tonight, first, Brian Miguel is also here. He's the chair of the school board, and we partnered together through this project. From our team also, Brent Fournier, our facilities director, is here as well. So the three of us really team with our professional team here tonight. But presenting tonight will be both Robin Tannenbaum from CHA Architects. They're the architect firm that is working with us on this project, and Doug Reynolds from Goral Palmer, who prepared the application that you will be considering tonight. So I'm going to turn it over to them really to walk you through, and we're also happy to answer any questions that come up.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the board. My name is Doug Reynolds with Goral Palmer, as Meredith has indicated. Before you tonight is an application for the Orono RSU 26 Orono School Facility for a site plan review for the expansion of a portion of the high school as well as ASA Elementary, and redoing the track and field facility at the rear of the site. The plan I have here depicts the overall site with ASA being down this end, high school in the middle, existing baseball and softball fields, and superimposed new track facility on top of the existing football field and track. I'll go through each one of the expansions. As it is closest to us, this is the ASA Elementary School. As you can see in the brown, we are showing 2 areas of expansion. The total expansion is at approximately 7,000 square feet, which includes expanding and refurbishing or redoing the cafeteria, as well as an updated entry at the front of the building to increase the necessary security measures for the school. Also, as part of the renovation of the cafeteria, we're displacing a couple of classrooms, and we're adding those classrooms in as well. There are some minor improvements to be made in the front parking lot to allow for ADA accessibility as far as grading goes, as well as some improvements to the back parking area as we're constructing the additions to the cafeteria.
Very good question. Everything on boards tonight? Might you have anything for the video screen or?
I have everything on boards.
Okay. We'll do the best we can. Perhaps a seat maybe farther up. Maybe you have a better vantage point.
Again, we're at the high school, we are proposing a approximate 16,000 square foot performing arts center to be placed in this little alcove in between the gym and the existing cafeteria. 2 new classrooms are being placed on the north wing of the school, and they're also at the same time renovating the cafeteria in the high school as well. As part of this portion of the development, we're proposing expansion of the existing parking area to add approximately 65 new spaces to the 203 old spaces for a total of 268 parking spaces out back. Excuse me. The number of parking spaces required by the ordinance is based upon the Performing Arts Center. We're well above the ordinance requirements, but knowing that sports games happen, and people arrive in single vehicles by themselves, the committee has indicated they wanted to add these new spaces. So again, those are the improvements. As you can see, as part of the redevelopment, I have some stormwater facilities. I'll talk about those a little bit later. As I assume most of you are all aware, that the existing track facility is in pretty good disrepair. It's only a 6-lane track, so it cannot host the high school events. So as part of this project, we are proposing a new track with the 8-lane facility, all new throwing areas, jumping areas, a pole vault, long jump, etc. And inside of the track would be a multi-purpose athletic field, would be able to fit either soccer or football. Just as a general overview, utilities for the project, we're not proposing any improvements to the existing utilities. All the utilities for the new expansions will be under slab. So again, we're not adding new utilities. We have received ability to continue to serve letters, which were included in the package from the water district and as well as the sewer district. Okay, and as I mentioned, the project is being reviewed here at site plan, as well as it's being reviewed by the Maine Department of Environmental Protection. During our due diligence process, it was determined that the expansion of the school in 1981 did not obtain a site location of development permit, which and it would have triggered that at that time. Discussions with the DEP have indicated that we need to apply for an after-the-fact site location permit. And as part of that after-the-fact site location permit, we have to meet both the current water quality standards as well as the water quantity standards, treating this facility as the 1981 pre-conditions. So we had to go back in time, go to existing surveys from the 1981 expansion and consider that our pre-development conditions as far as treating water quantity at that time. So again, the current expansion would have only required water quality treatment for the new expansion, for the track area, for the high school building and parking lot. So these two areas in green here would have been just under drain soil filters, treating the water quality for those areas. But as mentioned, we have to treat the flooding for the after the fact permit. There has to be a detention aspect of each of those features, as well as a detention pond in between the two schools to meet the pre-development flows in the post-development condition for our proposed expansion. So again, it was a little bit of an addition to what we were originally going to design, having determined that there was no permit. But again, we believe that the DEP will review it, and these ponds, etc., will meet the standards of the DEP requirements. Let's see, a couple of other items. We did receive a peer review comment letter from Kyle last week. We've reviewed all of those comments. Most of the comments will be simply we can address those without a problem. One item that was listed in that letter was the concern relative to some trees that may have been planted by the tree board in between the two schools. This is the area between the two schools, ASA being down here, high school being up here. And I apologize, I should have a different color marker. But the pond is essentially the grading for the pond is in this area, and the trees that the board is considering, the tree board is, I'm assuming you can't hear me now, are these trees in the middle. We recently, am I too far away from it? I thought I might have been. So again, the trees kind of in the berm area of this pond are the ones that the tree board is concerned about keeping. We are reevaluating the shape of the pond to see if we can massage it a little bit, pull it, make it a little bit longer, a little bit skinnier, potentially save those trees. So we don't know that for sure yet, but we're currently working on that to see if it can be done. And again, that is part of the reason that we're not going for the final approval tonight, knowing that we had these items on the as part of the peer review comments relative to having a complete package to you. In your package is a statement about traffic. The project is not proposing an increased enrollment. So again, no anticipated traffic concerns are there, and we don't require a permit from DOT. As far as our MDEP application, we submitted that to DEP at the end of September. We've received some initial comments. We've responded to them. We're waiting for additional comments. If we do change this pond, we will have to resubmit to the DEP for revised stormwater calculations, etc. The only signage on the plan is we showed an area. There's a sign at the front of ASA in this front alcove, and the school committee has expressed the interest of saving that, so we're going to save that and relocate it such that it's not being affected by the new building. We did include a few waiver requests in our application relative to the soils for septic, groundwater impact, and water supply, as this isn't a project that's affecting either of those areas. With that, I will turn it over to Robin real quick just to show building elevations or talk about the building elevations, and I will be here for questions.
Hello, I'm Robin Tannenbaum with CHA Architecture out of Portland, Maine. We're really pleased to be working on this project and excited to be here tonight. So we've brought some elevations of the buildings just because we know everyone likes to see them and we're proud of the direction the project is going in. This is ASA Adams. As Doug alluded to, and as you probably know, we are doing an addition at the front of ASA Adams, a new administrative area, and then set somewhat behind that 2 new classrooms. What you'll really see, I'm trying to keep my mouth on the microphone, is a new defined entry, which will be up close where you enter the breezeway now. That will be this area with a heightened entry moment and a covered area where parents can wait about 10 to 12 feet deep before people enter the building. So that's what we're looking at here. This line is the cover over the breezeway. Take shelter from the weather while waiting. We're showing a brick base to match the base that's already there. At this point, a precast sill that might become metal, and horizontal siding. Right now, the idea is to have a horizontal metal siding. It may become fiber cement at some point. Either way, it will be a fairly neutral dark color. As you may know, the building is a combination of several different eras of construction. So there's multiple brick colors and patterns. There's multiple wood sheathing materials. Our goal is to be quiet, contextual, nice, but not necessarily stick to one of those particular styles. On the back of the building, we're adding a cafeteria. So this is the view. This is if you were standing in the rear parking lot with the high school to your rear. These tall windows are in the cafeteria. This is letting light into the seating area. Ooh, this right here is the kitchen with a service door. And further around is the side of the cafeteria with a service door. The view right here is the side of the administrative wing. Again, pretty simple brick base, horizontal siding, flat roof in that area. So here we are at the high school, and on the very top we have what's really exciting, which is the elevation of the new auditorium. So this elevation is if you're standing in the current parking lot behind the high school, looking at what would now be the rear entrance. There's an open area within that just turned off. Well, there's an open area with an alley of trees, and in that area will be our auditorium. So it's a long, low, well, high, but flat roofed building. Again, horizontal metal siding. At the upper area, we have one accent panel. And then there are these 2 smaller areas. One is a stagecraft area, and on the side, it's where the loading dock is. And one is an entry. Those we're looking at either metal or fiber cement panels in a vertical nature that are a little bit playful, with their verticality. Looking here, this is actually the side of the current, what is now where the breezeway is, that I think many of us are familiar with. The breezeway will be removed. That elevation we're replacing the windows that are in the cafeteria, looking into the breezeway now. Now they'll look into the yard, new windows. And then at the very end, we're showing a new vestibule to enter the building. So most of this will be the existing brick. There'll be a little bit of patching where there's a door, and we're showing 2 new windows into the kitchen. It's back on. What you're seeing here is behind this, set back in plan, is the stagecraft area of the auditorium. This is actually the loading dock where trucks would come to unload set equipment. Also, it's an access to unload to the kitchen. And then back here, behind the cafeteria in plan, is the heightened area of the auditorium. The area you're seeing with the windows is the band room that has popped up, and that's letting some natural light, because otherwise the band room is in between other spaces. On the bottom of the board are elevations of the classroom addition. It's actually 4 classrooms that are proposed. So you'll see here the end of the existing brick building. This is the 1981 addition. So it's brick and it has that big metal, sort of, we call it a hat on top. We come out past that, again, a horizontal metal siding, a window package, some differentiation of color between the windows. The north elevation, this is now all brick. So we're extending this out a few windows. We're providing the same egress door at the end of the hallway that there is now, and a stair coming down and the other side. So again, a fairly quiet palette of materials. We won't be doing color selection for a while, and I'm happy to answer any questions if you have them.
Very good. Thank you. Do we have any questions for the board? Kyle, you also prepared a summary, and if there's anything that wasn't touched on that you might be able to add to the discussion here this evening, that would be helpful.
Sure.
So we're just going to get a few more points from him, and then we'll fire away with questions, and then after that, we'll open up the public hearing.
Sure. So a lot of what I had written in my report was already covered, so no need to repeat a lot of that. Just in general, this is a legally conforming lot in the medium density residential district. The use is allowed, so there's no issue there. The lot easily meets the minimum lot size, as it's almost 41 acres. One thing not mentioned so far is that the in front of ASA Adams, the parking area is in the town's aquifer protection overlay district. But because no construction is happening in that area, and this land use isn't one of the prohibited land uses in our aquifer protection overlay, that doesn't really become an issue or something to consider. The proposed lighting that was listed in the application packet is shielded from the top, so that meets our ordinance standards as well. Just seeing if there's anything else not touched on. I can add to. The applicant also provided letters from the Maine Historic Preservation Commission, as well as various organizations, Department of Agriculture, Conservation, Forestry, and the Department of Inland Fisheries and Wildlife, that didn't find any specific areas of concern or impact that would alter or call for a need to alter the plans in any way. So everything was okay there. I don't know if you want to move on to the comments that town staff had.
If you could just touch on those briefly, just so the board is familiar.
So from a land use perspective, there were really no issues or concerns with the additions, the track and field, the expansion of the parking lot. All of that met the standards of the ordinance as far as plantings for the number of spaces in the parking lot, things like that. our town engineer and public works director did come up with a memo that outlined some issues and concerns and just, questions that could be non-issues, but I'm just looking for a little more information on. Doug touched on some of those already. Some of these can easily be met in conditions, and I think some of them are items that are looking for more information that the town can review, such as possible alternatives to the way the detention pond behind the elementary school is currently laid out. It's brought to the attention of everyone that the Orono Tree Board has been working for many years to develop that space, and a lot of work and time has been put into that area. And the way that the pond is laid out currently would greatly impact that area and require, either clearing of certain parts of that area that would have to be replanted if possible. So staff was really just looking for information on the feasibility of different options and alternatives. Has everything been explored? It came up that the town would be willing to provide an easement on the town property to the north area of the detention pond. So with that knowledge, does that open up any more possibilities? Is it possible to adjust one large pond into multiple smaller ponds? Not saying any of those are feasible and possible, but just that things like that be explored and all options exhausted. And if this is the only location, that there be some sort of background information provided to staff showing that those alternatives were looked at and sort of reasons given as to why they couldn't be.
Has the tree board been involved in those discussions?
I'm not sure if.
I was just curious.
I've spoken with Rob Bjerksa, our public works director, who's works with the tree board, and I believe that the board has met recently and so everyone has been made aware of the situation. Aside from that issue, one of the other concerns raised by the town engineer with the detention pond was the proximity of it to the school and the kind of stabilization and the soil of that bank closest to the school, and just getting more information on that to make sure that would be stable. There'd be no erosion problems that would lead to any flooding of the school itself, as it's a pretty steep drop from the pond down to the elementary school. There's also been Orono sedge, which is an endangered plant species to the north of the detention pond, and the spillway sort of directs water from the pond towards the sedge. Just some response as to whether that would cause any problems, as it's sort of been identified, and with the spillway pointing towards that, does that mean that's all right, or would that have to be addressed somehow, either by replanting the sedge somewhere else if possible, or moving the spillway to altering the detention pond for that purpose as well. We had just a couple of comments from our life safety inspector about emergency access, just making sure that all entrances to any of the athletic fields were wide enough to have emergency vehicles come through. I think that's something that doesn't necessarily have to come back to the board at a future meeting. That's something that could be made a condition of approval, and that's a small enough amendment that can be added after the fact and approved by code enforcement before issuing a building permit or something like that.
Right. understand it, that this meeting will likely not be final approval. So those issues could easily be addressed by the time we meet again. So,
Right. So yeah, staff is recommending that due to the 10 or so comments and questions that they had, that even if nothing were to change, that those answers be provided to staff with the option
Mhm.
to be able to review them and then come back and have final approval at a future meeting, most likely in January.
it would be nice to get as far as we can this evening so that
Yes.
the next meeting. So I do want to bring up a point. Dave Thompson, board member, is on the tree board in the town, and he has been involved with that. Dave has quite a bit of expertise, put a lot of effort into that. But he had mentioned to me whether he needs to be recused from this item. In my opinion, I think his expertise is valued here, but I did want to put that to the board, and if there are any objections from the applicant, if Dave stays up here and can comment on that issue. So, but there were concerns over the tree planting. He is on our planning board as well as the tree board, and on most of the committees in Orono, I think. But,
Well, I have no issue with him on the board.
board members, what are your thoughts?
I think it's good for him to stay on.
I agree.
I would agree.
Applicant, do you have concerns?
No, thank you.
Very good. So thank you, Kyle. Before we open up for public hearing, I do have a couple questions. What is the status, and if you could please speak into the mic, what's the status of the DEP permit application?
We're still waiting on it. I mean, it's submitted. We've gotten comments, first round of comments. We've responded to those comments. So again, it's due. Again, the 180 days
Mhm.
is, I believe, the end of March. So again, but it's
Anything substantive that would change your stormwater management?
no. Based on my conversation with Ken Libby at DEP, I don't think he's even opened the stormwater yet. So if we have to make the change for the detention pond, won't be a delay.
Very good. So one thing I did notice, and again, I've had two kids, one that's just about to leave Orono High School, but I've spent a lot of time out back. So the additional parking is welcome. Is there any plan to limit the amount of parking? Because when you have 3 athletic contests going on in back, trying to get out of there, and I've been there when you can barely pass out 1 lane of traffic. So school buses coming in off of the main access road, turning into the street that that goes by the middle school gym. Yeah, that entryway there, when people park there and obstruct that, it would be difficult if a safety vehicle ever had to get through there. So as part of that additional parking, is there any plan to limit parking on that access road?
We
before
actually striped it.
Yeah.
We've striped it, no parking, signed it, no parking along that the building edge of that roadway. That comment has been brought up a number of times.
I would think the new spaces would alleviate that, but I just
It should help, but we did add that. One thing that we are adding is there's been a concern with the gym locker room is right there.
Yes.
And kids just jump and bolt.
Yes.
They won't do that as much now with the pond there and the parking lot there, but we've also proposed just a 4-foot chain link fence, just to make them go out around that fence, and then at least have a chance to look back, to the traffic coming this way. But again, our opinion was most of the time the kids are going to walk up this sidewalk and then come across the parking lot rather than going through the soil filter.
Speaking of that soil filter, I did notice in our engineer's review
Yep.
that they talked about it appears that you might be directing additional flow toward the culvert that goes
Yep.
under the access road. Have you
We're
addressed
gonna,
that
we're gonna replace, we're just gonna replace that culvert.
with enough capacity?
The capacity won't be an issue at all.
Yeah.
Again, it's an under-drain soil filter, it's dribbling,
Yep.
you know, but having been out there and seen it a couple of times, it's beat up on both the inlet and the outlet. You know, we're redoing the road, or we're repaving it. You might as well cut it up and put a new culvert in while we're there.
And I was actually on the selection committee for architectural firm back when, so I know enough about the football field, but it appears, I mean, there's always been a wet area back there, but it appears that you're actually going to capture more of the runoff. It looks like if you're building it up with the French drains and that system, is that
I mean,
correct? I'm just thinking those people back there, they have wet backyards. That's always been an issue.
Wrong thing. We did have the wetlands delineated back here. It's definitely wet as you get into the woods. Again, in theory, we're a bigger area than what the track was before. So again, everything from the outside lane in is being captured and then treating of that water quality feature over there. So again, it's a less of a flow to these points all the way around there. So yes, in theory, it's going to be drier.
Is there any impact on access to the cross-country trails?
Nope. This white bar right there is that's the
There's
cross.
that bridge there.
Yep. And the grades there are gonna be fine to access that.
I had a cross-country runner and a Nordic skier, and that they get their grooming equipment off there. So when I was looking at it, that's just what came to mind. So
Yep.
that access is not impeded.
Right.
Right. All right, I have a few. You guys must have some questions.
So I have one quick question about the detention pond. So looking at the proximity of the detention pond between the two schools and the shape of it and the slopes, are there any concerns with students, particularly elementary students, and safety? From time to time, I would imagine that's going to fill with water, and it basically is going to become an attractive nuisance for little kids. Has there been any thought to preventing kids from getting into this?
We had that discussion, and typically, and my professional experience, if you put a fence around it, they're going to get more hurt jumping the fence than they would if they're just walking into it. And fences catch trash, things like that. What we discussed with the applicant is that we take a look at it, build it without a fence, and if it becomes a problem, if it has water in it more than it feels like it should be, then they could fence it.
How deep is that permanent pool?
There's no permanent pool.
Okay.
It's a detention basin.
Yeah.
So in theory, it's empty in 24 to 30 hours.
Other questions?
I'm not on the tree board, but I am curious, obviously you're less than 6 months when you want to break ground or have to do some work there. So in a real world timing scenario, if there's a delay because of the retention pond, I'm just curious if you talked about the likelihood of being able to or the willingness to relocate some of those trees that are in the way, if they can be, again, safely done and still, if it wouldn't delay, because if DEP backs this up, we're waiting for DEP to tell us how many inspections you're going to do and all that.
Right.
And if they're not going to sign off until you get that done, I'm just curious.
Again, if we can massage it a little bit and reshape it a little bit, as I mentioned, they haven't opened it up yet. If I make those changes and before the next meeting, they'll probably be fine with it, and it shouldn't delay much at all. Again, we're going to try. If we can't completely get save all the trees, we talked about, the school department talked about replacing those trees. I don't think, and we'd have to evaluate them closer to see if they can be transplanted. I think size-wise, it might be pretty tough at this point, but
I would defer to our forester slash tree board member. And Dave, can we get your opinion on that, please?
I think my comment would be it's not just the trees. There are a lot of shrubs that were planted, and it's a habitat. Actually, the whole little forest there, or whatever you want to call it, was suggested by a Native American who was on our tree board at the time to have a wildlife habitat forest between the two schools. So it's not just replacing the trees or moving the trees or whatever. It's the habitat that we developed over the past 15 years that, that's going to be gone. You can't replace that. You can start over. I'm too old to start over on something like that. I just don't have the energy to do it. So I would suggest that maybe the tree board, a couple people could get together with the designers, yourself, and maybe talk to you and meet on the grounds and talk about it, see what we can come up with.
again, that we're willing to do that. Again, it's we got to meet the requirements of the DEP, and have a detention area in that location. Currently, there's a storm drain line that goes from the pretty much from the hockey rink up at that end straight down through where we're putting the pond. We're intercepting that storm drain line, storing water, and then going out the existing storm drain line. So again, it's a large cost savings to not have to pipe that in from another area to another area. So again, it's just digging a hole in the middle of the storm drain line, storing, and then outletting at the same storm drain line. So again, we're going to take a look at it, see if we can avoid it, avoid the concern area. But we'd be happy to meet and see the specific area and try if we have to try to replace or assimilate the forest in another location.
All right. So I'm Brian McGill, School Board Chair, and it's what you just said, but I just want to it's a two-step thing. We're certainly going to do absolute full diligence to see if we can move things in a cost-effective fashion. There are issues. There's the Orono hedge as you move north. There's a gas line as you move north. The existing drainage, stormwater drainage is where it is. So I don't think it's a slam dunk that we can move it, but we're going to do absolute full due diligence, and we'd be happy to have the two of you talk about options to move it. And if we can't move it, I think the commitment is to replant. And I understand what you're saying about replanting taking time, but I wish you would hear me out a little bit on this. There's different size of plantings that you can put in, right? You can put in a tree that's this tall. You can put in 20-foot trees. And I think I understand the purpose of that. The school uses it still as a educational environment and a wildlife habitat. And it's perfectly possible to replant with larger size plantings with similar species, with similar wildlife habitat function and educational function. I understand the emotional attachment is irreplaceable, but there's an intention to do a quality. If we have to go to Plan B and do a replanting, there's an intention to do a full quality Plan B replanting with plantings of size, not starting from the smallest possible tree you can buy, but plantings of size, wildlife habitat, similar species composition, to address the existing function of that area and to recreate that in some other area close by. So that would be Plan B. We'd like to not get there, but there are some existing constraints. The other thing, just to highlight again, is this was actually not created by the current construction. This was created by the high school addition in 1980, the requirement to do this. So in a perfect world, somebody would have permitted it in 1980, and we would have probably had the detention pond there in 1980. That didn't happen. But we're going to do our best to see due diligence if we can move it. If we can't move it, which is at least a non-zero possibility, I think there's a commitment to do not just a token, but a very high quality replanting with plantings of size, similar composition, similar intention, wildlife habitat, and all of those features that exist there today.
Thank you. Do have a question on lighting. There was a plan in the submission. So with the athletic fields and the improvements there, I didn't see or notice any lighting
The,
description. Would it-
the actually, they're maintaining the existing lighting at the field.
Okay.
We've avoided our layout such that the existing lights can remain.
I noticed
It's-
one near
it's a-
the
it's a-
stand. I saw that note on
It's
the plan, but I wasn't sure.
It's a pretty large
Yeah.
expense,
Yeah.
you know, but to put new lights in. So again, maybe that's a fundraising thing to get the new LED lights in the future, but at this point, we're keeping them the same.
Again, I just looked briefly, but what is the intent for press box, some of the other, the structures on site,
the-
seating, that kind of thing?
Right now, they're intending to keep the press box.
Yeah.
I can't remember if we're gonna move it, if we're gonna try to move it back a little bit.
We were contemplating moving it, but it's cost prohibitive.
Okay.
So we're gonna have to just buy a new unit with bleachers.
Yeah, so again.
The bleachers there aren't
To
really
speak,
worth
to speak,
saving.
in, yeah, to speak in the microphone, we're gonna keep the press box where it is and put new bleachers around it. To
Actually, we're
go ahead.
So that was the original intent, just cost savings again. And as the drawings have become more refined, our choices are either to move that existing press box back, which is cost prohibitive. And so we're exploring options to either buy a new bleacher unit that has an integrated press box built in. There are a number of those around. I think Old Town has one of those, maybe over there. Isn't theirs that way that we talked about?
Yeah.
Or simply constructing a new one, but leaving room in front for bleachers, because you can see the new design, the track goes right up to the edge of the existing press box. And we looked at having bleachers in that area beside it, but then the sight lines are, you can't see down the track. If you're in the top of the bleachers, the press box is in your way for seeing down the track. So that has to move somehow.
Is there consideration for putting it on the other side of the track?
I apologize. We are recording this. Would you mind having your question on the record, or do you want to just?
Do you want me to
field that
repeat
one?
it?
Sorry.
No.
I'll wait.
Okay.
Thank you. All right, Kyle.
Just make
you have a
one point, going back to where the ordinance kind of touches on the issue with the trees and plantings and habitat in that area. So there's nothing specific in the ordinance that would require, but the language most closely that would address it is in view the site plan criteria that the findings of fact would be based off of for utilization of the site. It talks about environmentally sensitive areas, including but not limited to wetlands, steep slopes, floodplains, significant wildlife habitats, fisheries, scenic areas, habitat for rare and endangered plants and animals, unique natural communities and natural areas, and sand and gravel aquifers must be maintained and preserved to the maximum extent. So maximum extent is kind of subjective. So it really leaves room for the board to, consider what they think is maximum extent. Is adding a significant cost by altering the layout and redirecting the existing pipes? Is that going beyond the realm of feasibility, or is that within the maximum extent that something like that would be feasible and should be considered? So I just want to make it known that the ordinance kind of leaves that sort of gray for the board to make that judgment.
I would think at this point, given the concerns and the effort and it seemed like the applicant or the chair of the school board acknowledged that, he put every effort into seeing if there's feasible alternatives that can save that area. I mean, you understand the concern, so I think that's a good path forward. If it can't happen, then we'll review that at another time.
Well, I just make another comment if I could. The first that I really heard about this was last week when I picked up my information for this meeting. And it was 2 days ago that I met with the superintendent of schools and a couple other people to go over it. So this really isn't much notice at all if there's a desire on the part of the architect and so on that they're planning this, to solve this without having a great big discussion, I would suggest that they get together with the tree board and talk about something concrete. What do you want to do? I mean, I'm not speaking for the whole tree board, but I think we would be open to other ideas of if you're moving it or moving trees or whatever. This is the first I heard that you could have a desire to recreate what's there or come as close as you can to recreate what's there. And I guess that's the desire of the tree board is to have a substantial, small mini forest that we take the children, fifth grade students for the past 10 or 12 years have gone up there. Every year they plant trees, they mulch trees, they water trees. It's an outdoor classroom for them. And I think that's important in their education. Most of them get a little tree to take home and plant. So it's been going on, and it would jeopardize the town of Orono's Tree City application if this doesn't get resolved right, because the tree board feels very strongly about this.
So it seems like maybe the maximum extent possible definition would be, I'm just throwing this out there, working in conjunction with the tree board to find a solution since it's not defined. I mean, that's really the maximum extent possible if you guys can find a solution.
Right. And it is entirely possible, as the chair of the school board said, that maybe there are no other options, but I think it's quite clear that you should explore them as best you can. And we've got a awesome bit of expertise over here and Mr. Thompson, and I think that'd be well worth your while to try to engage him. Very good. Well, I'm going to open up the public hearing. You folks have been patient. We've asked a bunch of questions. So if you could, please step up to the mic and state your concerns, your positive comments, please, by all means. Tell us your name, please, as well, for the record.
Sue Oberholzer, Westwood Drive. I noticed on the sketch that has the increased parking around the tennis court. I just want to comment that would increase traffic flow onto Westwood Drive. In a previous statement, I heard the road will be redone, and I'm not sure if they're talking about Westwood Drive being redone. Okay, because if it was, I was going to ask in what way. My question is, will there be outside in the sports complex, will there be an outdoor concession stand and public restrooms in the sports complex area? And if so, where will they be located?
The plans do not call for a public restroom and concession building at this time. It was hoped for in the work, but when we came down to trying to fit what we could into the project, that got eliminated. It is on our list of hoped projects to do through our capital improvement, through local funds. And there's some discussion about whether it remains where it is currently at the football field or to move it over by the big white building that's closer to the other side of that property. And there are pros and cons to doing it both ways, but it's not in this project, so we haven't, we're not really doing the detailed drawings for that. If I had to say today, I think my plan would be to put it over near the white building because it makes it more accessible to some of the other field events that are happening around that back area, the baseball, the softball field. So that would be the plan, but that's not in this project. You asked earlier, though, about the press box. There are a lot of people who have advised on this who are really more expert at determining about prevailing winds and track and where to put things to be designed well for those events. And the answer to that is the home kind of starting line and finish lines need to be on this side of the track. And so we wouldn't want to have press box and kind of home field stands on the opposite side from where most of the events will be starting and finishing. So that's why those items would remain. And there's actually more room over there to move back to have the press box a little set back. If you've been back there, you know that area where the kids play football and such during football games. So it would just move back a bit into that area.
Very good. Please do, if you could step up. Yep. Thank you.
While we're on the topic of spectator stands, is there a plan for the visitors spectator stand, like on the opposite side?
There are currently just some movable stands that are over there. I think 2 or 3 sets of them. If we get more over here, we might consider moving some of the sets that are over on the home side now to the other side to provide a bit more seating to be a little more hospitable to our guests. But there are some there now, and we, would not build any structure. They would just be the kind that are the aluminum frame that you can kind of move and as you need.
Could you address that comment that she just made? Because she said increasing the parking area and mentioned more traffic on Westwood, but as I understand it, that is not the case. Could you address that?
Again, I'm not sure where everybody parks now. It sounds like they park on the drive, they park on the lawn, they park,
They do.
they park everywhere. So, I mean, again, this is just more of a controlled parking environment for all those cars that are going to be, and it may, I assume some people are parking on Westwood Drive and then walking in. No,
Not typically, but that access drive when you have 3 events going on, field
Yep.
hockey, soccer games, all at the same time, it's a nightmare getting in and out of there.
Yep.
It's ridiculous.
and again, we're hoping to make it better with this additional parking area.
Correct, but the traffic generation is minimal to.
There's no
Correct.
calculable increase of traffic. Again, maybe some family says, oh, well, there's more parking spaces there, we can take both cars. You can't.
I don't see that parking. In my understanding, I just want to address our comment. If
Yep.
that's a misconception, that by creating those parking spaces, it
Yeah.
adds the more traffic.
Parking spaces do not create traffic.
Okay.
That's the straight answer. It's parking, and the event is what creates traffic, and the events are not changing.
Thank you.
One thing you highlighted that when you get into trouble is when you have 3 different events. Sorry, when you have 3 different events, you fill up the parking area, but they don't all release at the same time, right? The field hockey game ends at one time, the soccer game ends at another time, and whatever's on the baseball field or softball field ends at another time. So in terms of flow on Westwood, you're going to have the same number of parents for the same number of kids on a team releasing it at a given time. I think, as has been highlighted, it's more just that they're going to be parked in a legal parking space. But the release flow, there's no mathematical reason it's changed. It's the same size team, same number of parents trying to leave at the same time, and it's not going to be the whole parking lot at once.
Very good. Thank you.
I would say one last thing on that, just an observation as well from having been back there when things are really hectic and busy. You have people coming in, circling, no spot, going out, trying to get through the crowded. So if people come in and can actually get a space, you don't kind of have that crazy coming and going as people are sharking for spaces and trying to wait and find someone who's walking to their car and blocking traffic. So I think the flow works better with more spaces, just from my observation, and that parking along the road there that happens, and then people become desperate and start parking along the other side as well, is really minimized with more parking and with the, it's not up here, but the lines on the side. So hope to improve it all around for traffic and for safety.
Very good.
Hi, Lori Sidelko. I also live on Westwood Drive. Hi, neighbor. My question is also about trees, but a different set of trees. So in this drawing here, it doesn't look as if any trees are going to be removed for drainage for this particular drainage area down here. I have heard different. I've heard that the trees between the football field and Westwood are going to be, significantly cut back. And so that's my question. My first question is, and also it's flagged about halfway through the trees between the football field and Westwood Drive. And, indicating to me that perhaps that half of those trees are coming down. And so my question is, how many of those trees are coming down? That's my first question.
Good conversation on the board. None of the trees between the football field and Westwood Drive are going to be removed. The only ones that will be removed is maybe the first 25 feet for the construction of that drainage feature. And, again, greatly drainage feature. Again, I believe the ordinance requires a 50-foot tree buffer for that property line, where I believe we're at 150 and we might drop down to 125. So again, we're well within the ordinance of maintaining the buffer in that area. And then the flagging,
Survey.
is that all it is?
We did the survey to sum up the whole ground, so we got lots of questions about the flag.
Okay.
Just the limit of the survey?
A
That-
survey
that-
of the whole property, so we had an updated survey.
They did a boundary survey.
There we go.
So they're just boundary flagging.
So my understanding is that perhaps that it's actually Public Works that's going to be taking down some of those trees for part of that. So I guess in general then, and maybe this is to Kyle or the tree board or something like that, my concern is that there was a pretty significant clear cutting between Westwood Drive and Spencer. And this is kind of a bigger project. This is a bigger picture. This is not necessarily because of this project. But because of that, that's had a pretty significant impact on the wildlife in the area around Westwood Drive. So the deer, the fox, all of that kind of stuff, they're all coming out. And if you live around there, you've seen that. There's not many places to go. So my concern is, I guess, that if, there's some quite significant tree removal that happens between the school and Westwood Drive, that we're going to, again, have more wildlife issues, especially if there's retaining pools or detention ponds, things like that. So it's just something to consider.
Very good. Thank you.
Thanks.
Hello, I'm Teddy Jan Koval. I live on Mountain View Drive, former school committee member back in the day. But I appreciate all the efforts you folks have done. I have several concerns, and it does involve the retention pond right here. Because for those of us who are familiar with the fields, and I have been since the 60s, and my dad built the baseball fields. He's a former coach, Wally Koval, and Brent knows too, that this area of the baseball field might as well be considered a swamp. In fact, this was a swamp in the 60s, as you probably know if anybody was around at that time. But with the retention pond, where is that water gonna go after it runs off from here? Because we all know, the ones that live here, this is all wet till it raises up. So there's already a huge wetness here in the outfield, and John Parker's done a heck of a job with Black Bear Lawn Care diverting that away. I mean, what are you going to do with it? If all this huge area is going to come down here, that's going to seep into our existing fields. That doesn't make sense to me. I mean, it is a swamp here and here. So why not put the more wetness over here instead of there? I mean, I just, it's crazy because it's so wet through here and here. My family has spent thousands of dollars with the batting cage, removed that over here. It's just so wet here. We also put in a couple thousand for the existing press box. You know, it's heartbreaking to kind of like hear these things without, you know. And the other thing on this other map, you're adding 65 parking spaces, but where are you putting the children who practice on this field? I don't see any other practice fields being built. The middle school, my husband was a former coach of the middle school football. That's where they practice. And there's no other practice fields. You know, and also, if we're worried about traffic construction, why don't we take the traffic this way? I mean, really, I have severe concerns about this, and I agree with Mr. Thompson about these retention ponds and what it's doing to the environment. And the other last question, I don't know if anybody's going to answer any of my questions, but what is this made of?
Grass.
It's grass. Hallelujah. Okay.
Right.
So,
So
anyway, that's.
Meredith, it sounds like a couple of these are for you, and then the stormwater drainage, you can tackle that one.
Doug, if you know.
I did notice in the cross section, it showed the cut down there, and I was actually thinking along what she was talking about, that it is awful damp over there, and I was just looking at how far below the existing grade you were going to go to create those infiltration basins. So that came to mind.
It's a lined under drain soil filter.
Okay.
Because of the requirements of the DEP, we're lining it.
Okay.
So again, this is going to do nothing but help the drainage in that area. This again, the water will flow, all the water from here. Again, as the chair asked earlier, we're sending less water to the perimeter because the field is a bigger area. So again, less water is going to these outskirts. Now it's all going to here. This is a lined pond. Nothing goes into the ground. It all goes out and then drains down to right behind this building and then out to the river. There'll be a pipe to a ditch, and the ditch runs underneath the driveway culvert that the chair asked about earlier, then down to the next driveway culvert, out behind around the pool, down in the big ditch between the baseball field and the pool, and then out to the still water. So again, it's going to help drain the area. Again, it's being at the baseball field, outfield, it may not help that. We're not looking at that area at all. But again, having this here is going to bring more water away from these fields. Then.
Yeah, I just figured that was one of the trade-offs. My assumption, just creating parking, but something's got to give.
The practice area again. That's actually more of a Meredith. Yeah. What was it? What was the other question? Oh, running the traffic around here certainly would take out those trees. No, it would take out the the tree board trees again as we to build an up to standard roadway, a 24-foot wide roadway around the end of this building and come out to here. Our grading, our grading would be probably down. It would probably match in as you get down to the ASA. So we'd be taking out that whole slope and filling it in with dirt and material to have a road around that building. And again, the funding for the project, again, this road here, we're not rebuilding it. All we're doing is repaving it for cost savings wise. So I think that's what.
So Phil's right. It's a trade-off because of, number one, the cost prohibitive kind of around the end of the building, and with the end cap classrooms that we're adding on, and also eliminate some space down at that end of the building. And there's, an efficiency to add where the existing drive is now. This past year, actually, even though this field was available, the middle school and high school practiced on the field that's just beyond this. So, I mean, it is a loss. We'd like to keep that field if we could, but parking is a clear problem behind our building, and that's, what we came up with as the best solution, an imperfect solution to the problem. So.
My name is Don Joseph. I live right behind the backstop at the softball field on Mountain View Drive. I appreciate the openness tonight. I think these conversations are extremely important. Everyone loves transparency. I know a little bit of incoming comes with it, but I like to say enlightening. But we know the building. I've taught there for 19 years. It's an old building and it needs work. And so with work, it's going to involve some reconstruction and maybe some deconstruction, but we got to try to soften as much as we can. Okay, enough of that. We've talked about the press box, and my wife already said we've invested in the press box. We've put a lot of money into sports and other endeavors at the high school. We certainly love this place. I'm glad to hear that the press box is not going to be moved. It was a lot of work to raise money to build that, and to move those 4 telephone poles out of there with the extension of the press box. It's a mammoth task, which is, I don't think that's doable. I agree, Meredith. Whether the logistical board comes up with narrowing those bleachers, no one wants to buy a season's ticket at the University of Maine hockey and have a post in front of you. I know that. But maybe by narrowing those bleachers, they'll be able to get them closer to the track. I mentioned to Chris Libby several months ago, and I don't know if this is in the planning board or not, I think Bowdoin College has an 8-lane track, okay, on one side. The other side is 6 lanes. I know Bowdoin hosts a lot of big meets. I don't know where we are in the planning with that, but people don't want to hear that, because if you're going to build a track, you want it to be perfect. Well, we're working with an old building. It isn't going to be perfect. But if there were 8 lanes on one side, 100 meters, get the 200 meters that come around, and by the time you get to the far corner of the 400 meters, it's gonna, I coached track too for a long time in Brunswick, you can make it work. I don't know if that's being explored. People don't want to hear that because, we're laying out the money to put a track in. Let's do it right. Well, sure, we don't want to do it right, but we got to work with what's there already too. So I'm just throwing that out there. Have one side maybe an 8-lane track. It's not perfect, but it's certainly better than what we got right now. A question for someone here, maybe Doug, on this. The football field is obviously down in sort of a hole. Okay, is that going to be built up? Okay, is it? I don't know what kind of field turf is not going to work there, right? You're going to have grass, apparently. Grass or field turf on the football field? Yeah. Okay. There'll be a lot of people using it, and that's what Mr. Ice has got to figure out, how to maintain the grass. Another question too I wanted to throw out. Okay, so where's the drainage in the football field, if that's raised even with the track or a little bit above the track? Because it's going to be probably a little crowned, right? And that's going to go on the sides with the drainage. Good. Okay, I'm just going to put it on the floor for now. All right, Doug. Should I mention one other point while I'm up here, or should I wait? The auditorium. You mentioned the flat roof. Okay. Boy, I tell you, I hate to see flat roofs in Maine, especially in March. I don't know if that's going to be crowned a little bit, but I know the gym leaks. We've had leaks in the, Brent left earlier, but we've had leaks in the school, not just in the English department, but it's, how are we going to alleviate that flat roof from the auditorium? It might be good for 4 or 5 years, and then it starts to, I don't know. That's That's not my architectural expertise, but I'm just gonna show a concern for that. That's all, because we're in the building stage. This is the time to, if you're gonna squawk, this is the time to squawk or put items on the floor. So that's it for me.
Thank you.
To answer your question on the drainage of the field, first I just want to mention, when I first came up here and saw how low the middle of the track was, I said, wow, these kids at Orono are big, because they were heavy enough to lower that field in there. It's like, that is, I've never seen that before. But again, the track, the field inside the track will be crowned to the edges, to the four corners. There's going to be catch basins in all four corners, and actually around the edge of the track, there will be a what they call a vein drain around the perimeter of the inside of the track. So again, the drainage out there will be amazing, phenomenal as far as I know right now the catch basins at the four corners of the football field are catching rain because they're higher than the field. Again, I don't know how that it's not a mosh pit at every October football game. And then I will let Robin answer the question about the roofs. Oh, the eight, I mean, again, we can look at it. We can talk to the committee and have them consider it. It's nothing I had ever considered. We can shoot it around. And then
Oh, wow. I didn't, hello? Okay, I didn't see that coming. To answer about the flat roofs, it's a term we use. It's a bit of a misnomer. It's not dead flat. You probably know that. It's this roof, as I recall, we've had a couple different conversations with the structural engineer, but it is indeed pitched. I believe it's crowned slightly at the top. It's a combination of either tapered steel structure or tapered insulation. We have a couple different strategies in different locations. So off the top of my head, I can't remember what we have there. Then we have roof drains. We have overflow roof drains, which are required. Down, the normal roof drains go underground and tie into stormwater. The overflow roof drains actually come to daylight. They're designed so there's little, almost, you never notice them, but they're almost like little scuppers on the outside of building, and you should never see water there, but if you do, it's a problem. So the engineering takes into account the weight of the snow, and there's an active roof management. I appreciate the concern. I know it seems that way here, but it's still common and safe for large buildings. Thanks.
Other questions?
Just add one other thing here. The 63 parking places that are going to go in, I mean, we live where there's a lot of traffic, obviously, but we're only talking really, I think, 3 or 4 times at the most a year where this field space really gets packed. And there's either JV games going on with middle school games. There might be 3 athletic contests, but we're not looking at every single weekend it's jam-packed. So you've got to give up something to get something. And they either park on Westwood Drive or Mountain View Drive. When you live in an area where the school is, I mean, that goes with the territory. The benefits is when the weekend's clean and no one's there, you can go on the track and jog and run, and you play baseball or football or throw the ball around, whatever you want. That goes with the territory. So I think if Mike Archer or the athletic director, whoever's there, if he doesn't schedule 3 games, really 4 games, I mean, you got to look ahead and logistically make some planning. But I mean, it doesn't happen that often. I think with 63 parking places, it's going to help. It's not going to alleviate everything, but it's certainly going to help. And that's the price you got to absorb when you live in town right next to a high school, and you've got successful teams that are in the playoffs. And if you've got 2 or 3, you got to try to stagger them. And that goes with the planning with Mr. Archer. That's what he's got to do.
Other comments, questions? All right, I'm going to leave the public hearing open for a little bit. Questions from the board, and then we'll talk about process.
I have one topic that we haven't gotten to yet.
Oh, the plantings.
Yes. What do you know?
Yes, educated guess.
All right. They're on Kyle's list.
Yeah.
As best as I can tell from the plans, the plantings consist of planting two kinds of trees in the extension to the parking lot, and that there aren't any other plantings planned. And the two kinds of trees that are proposed are American elm cultivar Princeton, and the other one being the swamp oak. Let's see what its name is. It has a cute name. Bonnie and Mike. And I think the American elm would be a mistake. And the reason for that is I did some research on it, and American elms are vulnerable to Dutch elm disease. And this one is, when you look at websites from nurseries, it says it's highly resistant to Dutch elm disease. If you look in an article on this cultivar in Wikipedia, you find that various places they have died from Dutch elm disease. So the Wikipedia people come to the conclusion that they are moderately resistant. And somewhere else there's a reference made to something which is really very logical, and that is, if you plant these things in an area where there are no infected elm disease, trees with the disease, in other words, the disease is not present in the area, you'll probably get away with it. They can live there for a long time unless the disease gets introduced. Our area is heavily infested with Dutch elm disease because our native elms haven't all died yet. They grow up to be, to me, a remarkable size before the disease finds them, and then they die, and so we continually have a source of inoculum. So I don't think we should be planting that. Now I have to say, in terms of these two trees that were chosen, it's kind of neat that they are both tolerant of wet places, which I think is a good thing for the area. And they're both somewhat new, that is, they're not the same old, same old. Unfortunately, as I say, the elm, I don't think we should risk because it's likely to get Dutch elm disease. And then the Bonnie and Mike may work. It's supposedly hardiness zones 4 to 8. I'm not sure what that's based on, because this tree was discovered in the Shenandoah Valley in 2007, not that long ago. Since then, it's been propagated efficiently so that it was introduced commercially in 2012. So our experience with this thing is limited. That is, it hasn't been around that long for us to get a big history of what it can do. The genus, the species, the Quercus bicolor, does grow in Maine. It's found in York and Androscoggin counties, so it gets quite close to us. But the tree from which it's derived was in Virginia. which means it's likely to be a different ecotype and quite possibly not as cold resistant as the ones that live in York and Androscoggin County. Oaks grow slowly, and this particular one is a columnar one, which is what makes it interesting to landscape architects. But in a parking lot, I think we want a tree that spreads and sheds and gives shade rather than one that goes up as kind of a narrow column. So I think the Bonnie and Mike might make it. There might be a better candidate, and one that comes to mind is good old red maple. It's a tough tree. It grows in all possible environments. And so far, I don't know of any diseases that get it in our area. What's your opinion of red maple?
Yeah, I would definitely suggest red maple. Very tough tree. It's resistant to salt to some extent, more than most other trees. It likes wet ground. Of course, it likes really nice sites too, but it doesn't often get a chance to grow. They can't compete. So I agree with Switzer. I said that's what I would plant if I was doing it.
It's nice to have this expertise on our board. Very good, thank you. Actually, procedurally, I would leave the public hearing open,
Yes.
correct, for next time, okay. Other questions before we start to wrap this up? And hearing none, I'm going to leave the public hearing open.
I have a question. I'm Cindy Blees, and I'm the co-chair with Dave on the tree board.
Could you
And,
repeat, could you
I guess
repeat that into the mic?
I'm sorry. I'm Cindy Blees, and I'm a co-chair of the Orono Tree Board. And we've been involved in the tree board for 13 or 14 years now. But I was just wondering, is there any other way to have the water drain off without having a pond? Is there any other system that could be used to avoid the pond? I mean, we planted many trees there, and they're beautiful in the spring. If they're taken out, they won't be beautiful the spring after, that's for sure. And I think it's wonderful if you're planning to perhaps, if you have the pond, to put more plantings in if we've lost trees. But they're hard to replace. We have some unusual trees there. We have a weeping birch, which is really unusual, and many, many flowering trees. So I think if we can strive to do away with the pond or find another way to drain that water, I think that would be wonderful. I'd appreciate working with you to do some planning if there's anything that we as a tree board can help with too, so.
On that note, again, if you have a listing of the trees that are there, we'd be happy to take that so that, again, if we are unable to avoid that area, we'll be able to replace it and reconstruct it and to reassimilate the forest. Relative to alternates to the pond, there's many alternates. They're just more expensive.
Yeah.
Digging a hole in the ground, creating a detention pond is the most cost-effective way to detain water. Subsurface chambers would do the same thing. They're much more expensive. We couldn't install subsurface chambers without interfering with the trees. Again, it's as we stated earlier, we'll take a look at alternatives and see what can be done.
That sounds like it's part of your task, and please engage the tree board, and we'll see what you come up with next time.
Yep.
Very good. Other questions? We're going to leave this open. I think, would we also postpone the waiver request, or should we move on that this evening? What is your
I believe
opinion?
that can be worked on this evening.
Okay. well, let's cross that one off the list. We have in the submission packet, there's a whole table or checklist that they provided, waivers that they have requested. I'm not sure if you all had a chance to review that, but clearly some of the application items just don't apply to this project.
Which tab is it?
You have the tab open, so you can
It is
tab one. There we go. Right,
attachment one, first tab,
I remember reading it, but didn't memorize the location.
right after the introduction section.
Yep. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 waiver requests with the rationale for each of them in the right-hand column. I reviewed those. It does seem reasonable. If you could glance through them quickly. And once you've had a chance to do that, if I could get a motion.
Okay, which page are we on?
I'm sorry, this is on page, so tab number 1.
Tab number 1, okay.
Attachment 1, waiver from submission requests. Is
Thank
the
you.
section. And right in that table, there's
All right, I'm there.
there's 5 of them.
Yep. So on the left is the, when we
The
provide our application
requirement, yep.
checklist,
Yep.
the information there, and the reason for the waiver submission on it.
Fairly straightforward.
Yep.
All of these.
The letters from the water district and
Correct.
wastewater treatment facility, they're in the packet.
Okay,
Make a motion that we grant the waiver.
Okay, very good. Can I have a second?
Second.
Further discussion. These are fairly straightforward.
I think they're straightforward. There's no material change, so yeah.
They just don't seem to apply. So no further discussion. All those in favor of that waiver request. Good. We've tackled that one. So next time, again, public hearing's still open. We'll have some clarification on the items that you're waiting for. Any new developments from DEP that you could provide in a month would be helpful. Any changes to the stormwater, hopefully by then you'll have had a chance to meet with representatives from the tree board back there as well. So hopefully there'll be progress with that. I don't recall any other outstanding items. It appears that the public questions have mostly been addressed. Not that new ones might not show up at the next meeting, but we can tackle that then.
So in the report, identified some conditions
Yes.
that could be looked at when approval is moving forward. Those don't need to be looked at now.
Right.
Based on information coming back, more or less might be on next meeting's report.
Very good.
Certain things like having a pre-construction meeting, staff has talked about that as being an important part of before building permits issued, as getting the logistics down of temporary kind of activity during construction process. So, but that can be looked at next time.
Some of those are pretty basic. During construction, you don't want to be dumping a bunch of sediment into your nice new infiltration basin. So that's some simple stuff with the conditions, but that's for another day.
So we just need a motion to table the
Very good.
meeting.
Yeah, we haven't had to table anything in a while.
Not
So,
since I've been.
Yeah, can I have a motion to table this?
And it would be to the January 15th, 2020 meeting.
Okay, very good. Very good. Thank you. Can I have a second?
Seconded.
Any concern, discussion on that? All those in favor? See you next month.
It'll be a new year.
January
good.
15th.
So next up on our agenda, other new business. I don't see any. Kyle, do we have anything in the pipeline in addition to this?
There are a couple projects that are just in talks, but no formal applications, but possibly in the next week or so. So the January meeting could have potentially a few items.
Very good. Thank you. Discussion? I do have one item. I hope everybody has a really good holiday. So
Well, thank you.
there we go. We've discussed that. Next up is adjournment. Do you have a motion?
Make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Very good. Discussion?